In the Cold War, between the high-stakes space race and technological advancements and the melodrama that takes up a lot of space on this show, I would say that the melodrama won this week again. Hey, Drew here with my review of Rules of Engagement, the third episode of the second season of For All Mankind. And don't get me wrong, I'm still really enjoying this show. I think that it benefited a lot this episode from some great performances, particularly from the actors portraying the Baldwin family. I felt like Joel Kinnaman and Shantel VanSanten and Cynthia Wu. I think the way that they portrayed this family struggling with a lot of unspoken concerns about this son that died and left this glaring hole in their lives. I feel that this is something that really was done well, and I think I have to be impressed with the show for being willing to go there. I think, this is a show about space. It's supposed to be fun, it's supposed to be hopeful, and it's supposed to be exciting, and to spend so much time on this family and the personal toll that this journey has had for them and how they struggle with the death of a child, which is just one of the worst things that can happen to anyone. I can't even imagine how you move on from that. I feel that it's a gutsy thing that the show has done. I thought it was interesting when they started this season how they had jumped forward in time 10 years so that we're not really seeing the immediate aftermath of Shane's death. And it was this unspoken thing in their lives that they wouldn't talk about, but it was almost more noteworthy by the absence of talk about it. Like if they could bring up Shane and the passing in conversation without feeling, devastated by it, then you would almost think, okay, then they've moved on. But the fact that they're not talking about him at all almost creates the impression that he is more present in their thoughts and that they're less able to move on from him. And I feel that this episode, they finally talked about him. They finally dealt with some of the feelings that they were having. And I thought it was pretty well done. I particularly thought Ed's reaction, the way that it was portrayed, was very powerful. I think that the show has been gutsy in letting some of its characters come across as very unlikable at times. And I think in this episode, the combination of Joel Kinnaman's performance and just Ed's reaction as he comes down in an authoritarian way on Kelly and telling her she can't join Annapolis, I just thought that was really well handled because it was relatable, it was understandable, and it plays into this character's fears that we've seen developed, that he feels guilty that he wasn't there for his family when they needed him most, and he feels that he was perhaps responsible for the death of their son. And I felt that the way that Karen came alongside him in this moment and helped him work through his feelings, even though she initially had some of those same feelings. This conversation that they had here, though, where they talked about how you can't keep people safe no matter what you do. You have to accept the possibility of loss. I just felt like this was a really well done scene. And as someone with 2 children, I really related to a lot of it. Otherwise, this episode, we found out that the Russians have taken over the U.S. mining site on the moon because they've been listening to their communications on the base with this bug that was placed there last season, like 10 years ago, while Ed was torturing the random Russian. Did they not think we can remember what happened that episode? There's no way that guy had time to plant a bug. I'm not entirely sure if they're just assuming we won't think too hard about it, or if they actually have some kind of explanation for how this would happen. But I feel like it's the former. I just don't see how it could have happened. If you have theories, let me know. But I didn't see any indication that he would have had time to do that since he was tied to a chair for the most of the time. And he only got let go, eventually, but he had already been stripped out of his suit and stuck to a chair. How could he possibly have had that bug along or had the time to plant it? I don't know how we're supposed to buy that. But this plays into the Cold War aspects of the show, which are really pretty interesting. Obviously, the show is portraying Reagan as something of a hawk, and it's showing how the mentalities that Reagan had as a leader during the Cold War, in the showrunner's opinion, kind of it made the situation more tense and made it more dangerous. But we see them in this episode grappling with militarizing the moon, with training Marines to go to the moon and arming them so that they can protect the base from Russians showing up and trying to take back this mining site. And to me, this is really interesting stuff. I fully expect this show to get as close to the edge as possible with this and then to reel it back in. I don't really expect there to be warfare on the moon. But Joel Kinnaman has said this show is going to go in a completely sci-fi direction in future seasons. So it's going to be interesting how much this timeline actually eventually does deviate. But so far, there have been some pretty interesting developments. Obviously, the characters have laptops and they have cars that don't run on gas, and some of the things that we're only seeing come into existence in the last 10 to 20 years. But it's, for the most part, it's just a very, very similar timeline. It's just a Cold War that extends all the way to space, as some of you have pointed out. But it's interesting to see how far they can go with this. And I give them I give them very, very high marks for the creativity and the level of detail that they've gone into with this timeline and some of the things that they've had happen. Otherwise, Aleida Rosales re-enters the story this episode, played by Coral Pena. And I have to say, she did not make a good first impression as basically a new character. I mean, she was in the first season technically, but since she hasn't seen Margot in 10 years, I feel like she essentially comes off as a new character to the audience. And to me, having nothing to do with anything other than her as a character, I just didn't find her very likable. I think that the fact that she resents Margot for not sacrificing to take on a stranger all these years in the past, I feel like that doesn't seem very sympathetic to me. I understand why Margot feels guilty for not, taking her on and for not helping her, and especially seeing how it has shaped her life in this fashion. I feel like it's understandable why Margot would feel guilt for that, but I don't know that it's that understandable that Aleida could have expected Margot to do that and could be so angry with her for choosing not to. And her reaction when she finds out that her boyfriend went behind her back this episode, yes, I agree, he probably shouldn't have done that, but it's something that, in another show, she would forgive him for, especially since it worked out for her benefit. So to me, she just comes across as kind of whiny and unsympathetic here, and I don't love the fact that she has been fired from all these other jobs. I feel like they could have found a more logical reason for her to end up at NASA. I feel like they keep having the main characters at NASA, help people get jobs that seem like they really shouldn't be given these jobs. They seem like they have a lot of personal issues. You see it with Ed pushing Gordo back into space when I really feel like he doesn't seem like he should be an astronaut. And I think you see it here with Margot getting Aleida this job, which I don't think, on the face of it, she seems like a bad roll of the dice to me. Of course, I think that many of you are correct that she's going to have a big role to play in getting them to Mars, as some of the aspects of her character in season 1 foreshadowed. But I'm not loving the way that she's acting so far this season. But again, it's one episode, so we'll give her a chance to grow as a character. Obviously, she's coming into the story from a rough place. Otherwise, this episode, more examples of how Gordo and Tracy and how their lives have just been completely reversed. And I think it's interesting how my interpretation of a lot of what's going on with Tracy is, obviously she had been pushed into this role as a housewife, and now she is able to do exactly what she wants to do, and she's kind of acting exactly the way that Gordo was acting, more or less. And it's interesting because I wonder if she's doing these things because she genuinely thinks that she wants to, or if she's doing them because she's, kind of playing a part the same way that she played the part of a housewife, and she's not really considering whether or not it's what's best for her. As some of you have pointed out, I do feel that even though he still has a lot of personal struggles, it seems as though Gordo is in a healthier place emotionally than she is. You see him this episode being protective of her marriage. We still haven't seen her husband in person yet. I'm not exactly sure why, but you see him being very, very careful not to undercut her husband's role in her life with, you know, his actions. I think the role of an ex-spouse is a challenging role, and I think he's doing his best to not overstep certain boundaries, even if it seems as though Tracy still kind of has one foot in the door. And I think, you know, it was very telling, some of the moments in this episode where he still cares for her, but he knows that she needs to move on. I felt the way that he, you know, was there for her in a pinch shows that he still loves her deep down, but that he, at the end of the day, knows that he can't be there for her the way that he used to be. I also think it was interesting this episode seeing him grapple with his, you know, how he's kind of a dinosaur, he's kind of a relic of a decade before, and grappling with the new technology and grappling with some of his old fears as he thinks about going back to the moon. I particularly liked that scene that they ended the episode on where he's staring at the red light and it brings him back to that Russian base on the moon and causes him to have a freak out moment in his hotel room. I thought it was very well acted by Michael Dorman, and I'm really interested to see where they take this character this season. So on the whole, I thought this was another solid episode of For All Mankind. Again, a very grounded episode, didn't have a whole lot going on in space, but for me, that was okay. But let me know what you thought in the comments. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of other shows, please consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching.